If you were told $70,000 was going to be the minimum wage in your company, what's your feeling? If you're at the bottom of the system, you might be getting a massive promotion. This might be the best news you've heard all day. If you're at the top, that could kind of piss you off. Where's my promotion? Where's my raise? Why are they getting the increase? If you're in the middle, you might feel more disgruntled because maybe you were already making $70,000 and now it seems like people that are less skilled, maybe less experienced, are now making the same level as you. And so they went from making $40,000 or $50,000 or less even now to the same wage. This happened across the board in this company. There were repercussions. Some people thought this was the best thing ever. There was at least a couple employees I heard about that quit. It broke the internet at the time. When I first decided that I wanted to find out what the Bible actually said about money and what God thought about money, I struggled with a few particular verses and stories in the Bible around money. And one of them was the parable of the workers in the vineyard. I had read this from one perspective all my life, and I began to be challenged to read it from a new perspective as I studied it. This verse is actually very fascinating, and I believe it'll radically challenge how you look at money if you will take a minute to listen to another way of seeing this verse. As you know, in the story, if you've read it, it's Matthew chapter 20 in the Bible. I think it's verse 1 through 16. There's an owner of a vineyard. He sends out his workers and agrees to pay the ones that at 6 a.m. a certain amount. But there's so much work to be done that he goes and finds more workers at 9 in the morning. The first group, he agreed to pay a full day's wage. The second group, he doesn't say exactly how much he'll pay. He just says, hey, I'll be totally fair with you. There's still so much harvest that at noon he goes back looking for more workers, finds a whole truckload of workers, brings them out, says, I'll do the same. I'll be fair. Just come work and I'll take care of you. And then at 5 o'clock, he goes looking for more workers, brings another truckload out, says the same thing. I'm going to be just and fair. You never hear what he's going to pay those other workers. At the end of the story, he goes to pay everybody, and he starts with the guys that started first thing in the morning, and he's like, here's the Roman coin, one denarius, silver coin in that day, and that's what they agreed on. And then he goes to the second people, the ones that started at 9 in the morning, and he gives them the same wage, and then the same to the guys that started at noon and the ones that started at 5 o'clock. Those guys in the morning that started were disgruntled. They felt it wasn't fair, and they were really pissed off. And basically, Jesus tells this story, and he's like, you know, it's the prerogative of the vineyard owner to do whatever they want with their money. And it's kind of left at that. And you're kind of left hanging because if you were the person that started first in the morning, it seems totally unjust and totally unfair. And that is one way to look at money, through the lens of what is just and fair. But there's another way to look at this. To give you a context, one Roman silver coin in that day was equal to one day's wages. So I was kind of exploring what that would be in modern America. And it seems like the average laborer's wage in America is about $18 an hour. It ranges from $11 to about $24 an hour. Nationwide, if you go to field workers, which they were vineyard workers, they're harvesting, the average daily national wage is like $20 an hour. It makes it easy for math. We had guys working at 6 in the morning and people showing up at 5 p.m. So they were probably working from dawn to dusk. So let's give this like a 12-hour day, right? 6 in the morning till maybe 8 p.m. You got a break, but let's say they're getting overtime. So $20 an hour times 12 hours is like $240, maybe some overtime. Let's just say it's like $300 a day. So he pays that first group $300 a day. He pays the next 3 groups the same. And they're all pissed off, the first ones, and felt like they weren't dealt with fairly. But if you can step outside of this context, I want to give you a different, radical, modern-day parable that ties to this. In 2015, a guy named Dan Price, the CEO of Gravity Payment Systems, a credit card processing company, decided to raise the minimum wage in their company to $70,000. He took a payroll cut from 1.1 or 1.2 million down to $70,000. Well, as you can imagine, there was huge repercussions. Think for a moment. If you were told $70,000 was going to be the minimum wage in your company, what's your feeling? If you're at the bottom of the system, you might be getting a massive promotion. This might be the best news you've heard all day. If you're at the top, that could kind of piss you off. Where's my promotion? Where's my raise? Why are they getting the increase? If you're in the middle, you might feel more disgruntled because maybe you were already making $70,000 And now it seems like people that are less skilled, maybe less experienced, are now making the same level as you. And so they went from making $40,000 or $50,000 or less even now to the same wage. This happened across the board in this company. There were repercussions. Some people thought this was the best thing ever. There was at least a couple employees I heard about that quit. It broke the internet at the time, apparently. It went viral. Some accused the CEO of being a socialist, and others respected his choices for fairness and justice. The fact remains, he, as an owner, can do whatever he wants with his company. People can make their own choices. When I began to look at this story, not from an employee perspective, but from the landowner and employer's perspective, I have a radically different experience, and I begin to see God in this story, who he's represented by, and the way Jesus told the story, from a new light. One, I've been in business. We have food trucks, we've been at massive events, and we have 1 or 2 days to make a huge amount of money. Whether I have an employee that ends up getting sick or there's just more work than we can handle, I have pulled people out of the lineup. My sons brought people back that were willing to work, and we employed out of the gate and paid plus generous tips in many other contexts. That's the one that just comes to me offhand. Because there was a harvest. We had 1 or 2 days to make as much money as some people make in a few months and what we would live on. And so it was our harvest, and we needed labor, we needed help. Where do you find trusted help in that moment for the volume and the type of business that we have? Years ago, before I was a business owner, I began to look at this story in a new context, and that was that you get what you settle for. You get what you ask for in life. You get what you negotiate for. The people that got hired first, they agreed to a wage. The ones that came on later in the day, they agreed. Even without knowing what that wage was, they trusted that landlord was going to take care of them. And he did. And they seemed to be more than satisfied walking away. You're going to get in life what you ask for, what you settle for, what you negotiate. If you aren't happy with what you're getting in life, if you aren't happy with where you're at financially, then start asking for more. Start negotiating for more. Don't settle for less than what you believe you're worth, or at least begin moving in that direction. If you don't know what you're worth, find out. You can do the same job in 3 different cities and make a different amount of money. My husband and I were just talking about how different the same skill of being a waiter or a waitress at 2 totally different restaurants can be the difference between bottom of the barrel tips and top of the pile wages and tips. That can be the difference of hundreds of dollars a day, if not $200 or $300 a day. And how different it is to be a waitress at a mom and pop diner, or there's also steakhouses, there's really high-end restaurants. It's the same skill of being a waiter and a waitress. It's just refining your abilities to interact with people. It's speaking to people with a different level. It's maybe dressing a little nicer, doing your hair up a little bit more, maybe having a little more makeup, maybe taking care of your physical body a little better. It's presenting, how you speak, how you interact with people, learning how to open a bottle of wine. That was a skill I didn't have when I went to the next level and becoming a waitress. I had never opened a bottle of wine at a table in front of people. That was intimidating. That was scary the first few times. I had my share of torn corks and embarrassing moments, but I learned that skill, and just that one little skill could take me as a waitress to open up a whole new world of my ability and capacity to make money and tips, and where I could find employment as a waitress. Ultimately, you get what you agree to, you get what you settle for and negotiate for. And I think the other thing is to recognize that no matter where you're at, people are always wanting fairness. There's going to be jealousy and comparison, and you have to shut that down in your own heart and mind if you're going to move on. If you're going to stay where you're at, everybody's going to gossip, everybody's going to be jealous, and they're going to be in the bickering and catfighting place of life, because that's where people, when they're not moving and growing, that's where their energy is invested. It's not invested in growing their emotional well-being, their relational capacity, their health, their finances. It's just bickering and infighting and miserable because people are not satisfied with where they're at or satisfied with who they are. And finally, I think it's understanding that not only God, but whoever is the owner can make whatever sovereign decisions they want. For me, looking at this parable through a new lens when it comes to finances, it's recognizing that I love these 2 words, or this definition, about how grace is not getting what you do deserve. the negative consequences and the bad things from the bad choices you made in life. It's like God wipes out the seeds that you planted in that harvest. It doesn't always happen, but sometimes there is grace that just covers the stuff we should be reaping in life. What you sow, you reap, generally speaking. And then there is also the favor of God, which means that you can get what you don't even deserve, what you didn't even earn, what you didn't even plant. You can get a harvest in a place that you didn't even sow seed in a positive, amazing way. I experienced that in one of my first businesses. Well, I had a couple other failures, but in my first real business, I was handed a business on, I always described it as a silver platter. It was a full-fledged 10-year-old window cleaning business with an incredible reputation that was basically handed to me because the last employer was moving on, and he was happy to give me the clients, teach me all the skills, and teach me the business before he left town a week later. It opened up a whole world of business to me, and my income and my life began to transform. And so I look at this parable in a new way, and I hope that this short video will challenge you to look at this in a new way and see both God's sovereignty, but also how is this different if you're the business owner. If you don't get anything else but from my channel is in the power to get wealth, that you will begin to go from being an employee to being an employer and becoming the head and not the tail in any situation that you're at. Because if you want to radically increase your financial literacy, your financial education, there is almost no other way to make more money than you can ever dream of or imagine than if you own a business. There is no cap, no limit. It is an inexhaustible world. This channel is focused on helping you build that financial literacy, understand the spiritual nature of money so that you can change your life radically. And I use the ancient principles that I've found in the Bible for wisdom when it comes to money. So with that, if you found any value in this, please share this video and subscribe if you haven't. This is a growing community, and I have some amazing things on deck to create, engage with this community in really amazing ways outside of video platforms, but in a really intentional, created community space. I hope to see you there and on the next video. Thank you so much.